Scary deep wood stories. Whispers in Deadwood Forest. The town of Fair Hollow bordered a stretch of forest so dense and ancient that maps labeled it only as Deadwood. Most locals never stepped foot in it, not because of legends, but because of what never came back out. For decades, missing persons cases piled up, always with the same detail: final GPS pings showing they had entered Deadwood. For 18-year-old Clara Winslow, those warnings weren't deterrents. They were bait. Her older brother Nathan disappeared in Deadwood a year ago, leaving behind a trail of distorted video logs and an unfinished journal that ended with the words, "They live in the silence." Clara, armed with his footage, a GoPro, and her best friend Jonah, ventured into Deadwood with one goal: find out what happened to Nathan. The first day was calm. The forest felt abandoned but not hostile. Trees towered like watchmen, their moss-covered trunks absorbing every sound. No birds, no wind, just a dull ringing in her ears. By sunset, they reached the last GPS coordinate from Nathan's camera. There they found his torn backpack beneath a large pine, along with a camera, still intact. Jonah played it while Clara scanned the surroundings. The footage was warped, static-laced, but showed Nathan frantically whispering, "Don't let them see your face. Mirrors are their doors." Then the video cut out. That night, Clara and Jonah set up camp, nerves raw. Just after midnight, Clara awoke to the sound of a girl crying softly outside their tent. She opened the flap, no one, but the crying continued, now inside her head. Jonah didn't hear it. He saw something else, a shape standing perfectly still between the trees, just beyond the firelight. It didn't move, didn't breathe, but when he blinked, it was gone. At dawn, they found their campsite had shifted. Trees around them were not the same. Jonah swore they'd camped near a creek, but now there was none. Clara's compass spun in circles. GPS dead. That afternoon, they stumbled upon an abandoned cabin. Inside were broken mirrors, crude symbols painted in ash, and hundreds of photos pinned to the walls. Every photo of a person looking directly at the camera, their eyes scratched out. Among them was Nathan. In his photo, a shadow loomed behind him. As Clara reached for it, every photo fluttered without wind. Jonah screamed. The mirror in the corner, long cracked, briefly shimmered. Behind their reflections, something moved. They ran. By nightfall, the forest changed again. Trees grew closer together. The ground pulsed faintly beneath their feet, like a slow heartbeat. Clara found a tree etched with the words, "The forest feeds on memory." Jonah confessed he didn't remember his mother's face anymore, or his last name. Clara tried to recall hers, but even her brother's voice now sounded distant. That night, their fire wouldn't light. In the darkness, whispers returned. Clara heard Nathan's voice. Jonah heard his own. They screamed at each other to stop. Neither had spoken. The final straw came when Clara found Jonah sleepwalking, holding a shard of mirror and whispering, "They promised I'd be whole again." She slapped him awake. He dropped the shard. It landed sharp end up. No reflection, just blackness. From that void, a hand reached. Clara's scream echoed through the trees like a flare in a black sky. But no birds scattered, no animals stirred. Just silence swallowing the sound like it had never happened. She yanked Jonah back, the mirror shard tumbling into the leaves where the hand had reached. It didn't follow. For a long moment, they stared, breath frozen, waiting for the forest to react. But it didn't. Not yet. They didn't speak, just packed, fast. Dawn never came. The sky remained a churning gray, a false morning that seemed to blink in and out like a dying bulb. Hours passed without sun. Jonah's watch spun backward. Clara's phone displayed a date from 5 years ago. The forest was unraveling time. They trekked deeper, following a trail of black moss that pulsed underfoot like veins. The trees leaned in, trunks bending subtly as though listening. Clara whispered Nathan's name over and over, like a tether. Jonah stayed silent, jaw clenched, knuckles white around the compass that no longer spun. It ticked like a heartbeat. By noon, if it was noon, they reached a clearing with 7 stone pillars arranged in a circle, each with a shattered mirror suspended by rusted hooks. Beneath each mirror, a name carved. One of them read, Nathan Winslow. Clara collapsed. Jonah stared, expression unreadable. Then the mirror bearing Nathan's name began to weep blood. Clara reached out. Jonah grabbed her wrist. They want you to look, he said. That's how they enter. Through the gaze. Just then, the mirrors shimmered. Reflections moved. Not theirs. The reflections were of themselves, but distorted, rotting, mouths open in silent screams. Behind them, towering silhouettes, thin, jointed like spiders, faces wrapped in gauze, watched. The Clara in the mirror turned, stared directly out, and whispered, "Let us in." Clara screamed and threw a rock. The mirror cracked. The clearing screamed with her. Trees shook. The earth opened slightly and then resealed like breath, held and released. The forest was waking. They fled without looking back. Hours or minutes later, they found themselves on the same trail. No matter which direction they returned to the pillars, the forest wanted them there. That night, Clara dreamt of Nathan. He stood in the circle, his eyes bleeding, skin translucent. He spoke in reverse. She woke to find the same words carved on her arm. Remember in silence. Jonah was missing. She found him sitting cross-legged at the center of the pillar circle, eyes shut, whispering the names of people he didn't know. As she touched him, he opened his eyes, and they weren't his. Not anymore. He smiled too wide. "You brought me back," he said, but the voice wasn't Jonah's. Clara stumbled away, heart hammering. She returned to the cabin alone, desperate. The photos were gone, the mirrors intact. One showed Nathan smiling. The mirror beside it reflected Clara, but not as she was. Older, bruised, trapped, screaming. Clara screamed in real time as a voice whispered from behind, "They only need one more." Clara bolted from the cabin, the whisper still coiling in her ears like smoke, poisonous and cloying. The air outside had thickened into a choking fog, and the trees now loomed taller, darker, closer. Her breath came in ragged bursts as she sprinted through the underbrush, ignoring the cuts and scrapes as branches clawed at her skin. The forest no longer felt like earth. It pulsed beneath her feet, each step echoing like a heartbeat too loud, too fast. Somewhere behind her, something moved. Not footsteps, but something dragging, scraping, breathing. Clara didn't stop. Couldn't. Eventually, her legs gave way, and she collapsed beside a decaying log covered in white fungus that breathed in sync with the forest floor. She clutched her chest, trying to remember her name, her brother, Jonah. But memories flickered like dying embers. The whisper had taken something. Ahead, the fog parted just enough to reveal a crooked wooden sign nailed to a tree. Whispers stay where ears bleed. Her earlobes felt damp. She touched them. Blood. She stumbled onward until the trees opened up to a clearing where a rusted playground stood half swallowed by earth. A merry-go-round spun slowly, though there was no wind. A single swing creaked. A child's voice laughed. Clara stepped forward, drawn in despite herself. A little girl stood beside the slide. Her skin was gray. Her mouth stretched ear to ear, sewn shut with wire. Her eyes were hollow. Clara froze. The girl pointed behind Clara. She turned. A line of children stood silently at the edge of the woods, identical, unmoving, their mouths also sewn, their eyes all fixated on her. Then one by one, their heads tilted in unison. The girl by the slide opened her stitched mouth. No words. Just a sound like glass breaking inside Clara's head. She screamed and bolted. The laughter chased her. Not behind. Inside her. Her memories scattered. She tried to say Jonah's name, but couldn't recall the syllables. The forest was taking her, piece by piece. When she stopped running, she was in front of a tree with dozens of handprints pressed into the bark. Children's hands, small, burned in. Above them, carved in jagged lines. Feed the forest what it forgets. Clara's knees gave out. She wept. Her tears hissed against the soil. Then, footsteps, slow, steady. She rose and turned, fists clenched. Jonah stood there, but his eyes were empty, his voice a low static. "You remembered me," he said, "so I can stay. But something must leave." He reached out. Behind him, the forest cracked open like a mouth. Clara backed away, but her body didn't respond. Her limbs stiffened. Her fingers twitched on their own. She was being pulled inside herself. Her reflection in Jonah's eyes twisted, her face unrecognizable. "One more," the forest said through Jonah's lips. "One more and we awaken fully." 1,000 eyes blinked open in the bark around her. She screamed. The forest listened. Clara ran until her legs gave out beneath her, and the air stung her lungs like shards of frost. Somewhere behind her, Deadwood shifted again, swallowing the path she thought she'd taken, twisting branches into thorns and shadows into walls. She didn't know how long she lay there on the cold moss before she heard it. Jonah's voice calling her name. It was distant, warped, like a cassette dragged underwater. She hesitated. She had seen his eyes. They weren't Jonah's anymore. Still, she followed the sound because anything was better than being alone. The voice led her to a stream she didn't remember crossing. It was too still, too black, reflecting a sky that churned with red lightning. Across the water stood Jonah, or the thing wearing him. His skin looked pale and thin, like wax stretched over bone, and his eyes were too wide, too alert. "Clara," he said in a soft, flat voice, "you left me." Clara didn't answer. She stepped back. Jonah stepped forward, onto the stream. Not across, onto. The surface didn't ripple under his feet. She turned and ran again, crashing through brambles that tore at her arms and face until she burst into another clearing, gasping, heart hammering. This clearing was wrong. Trees circled inward, all twisted toward a center stone slab covered in dried blood. Above it, strung between two trees, was a line of wind chimes, made from teeth. As she backed away, she tripped over something soft and wet. She turned. A body, fresh, but it was her. Her own face stared back, lifeless, pale, eyes rolled up and mouth open in a silent scream. She screamed and scrambled away, but the body moved, hand twitching. It whispered, "You're late." Clara bolted, blind with terror, until she reached what looked like an old church deep in the woods, half swallowed by vines. She burst through the rotting doors, expecting silence. But the inside was filled with whispers, dozens of them, echoing without source. The pews were broken, and the altar was gone, replaced with a massive mirror that took up the entire wall. Its surface was dark, fluid, breathing. Around it were carvings of symbols, eyes, spirals, mouths sewn shut. As Clara approached, her reflection stepped forward independently, staring at her with a mixture of pity and hunger. "You broke the pact," it said. "Now we choose." The mirror bulged and hands pressed out from behind the glass. Dozens of them, clawed, reaching. Clara screamed and fled, the whispers rising into screams behind her. She didn't stop until she collapsed again, somewhere unfamiliar, the trees looming with silent judgment. She had no map, no gear, no Jonah. Everything felt distant, like pieces of her memory were being stolen while she blinked. She looked at her hands, blood under the nails. Hers, Jonah's? She couldn't remember. Her name, still hers. She repeated it aloud to anchor herself. "Clara Winslow. Clara Winslow." The forest listened. Leaves shifted. Something stepped out from between the trees. Not Jonah, not a stranger. Her brother, Nathan. But he looked dead. Hollow cheeks, skin gray, eyes empty. "They took me," he said in a rasping voice. "They made me one of them. But there's still a way." Clara's heart surged. "How? Tell me." Nathan opened his mouth. A second voice poured out, high, chittering, like insects crawling over teeth. "Trade," it said. "A soul for a soul. Leave one behind." Clara stepped back. Nathan's image flickered. Then he was gone. She was alone again. Except she wasn't. Behind her, the trees shifted, and one of them opened, like a mouth. From it, a girl stepped out, pale, hair matted, lips stitched shut. She held a mirror and offered it to Clara. On its surface, Clara saw a memory, her and Nathan as children, playing in the woods before the warnings. Then it changed. Nathan screaming, being dragged, Clara turning away. She hadn't remembered that. But it was there. Real. "No," she whispered. "I didn't." But she had. She had run once before. She had left him. And now the forest wanted balance. A trade. No, she repeated, backing away. The girl stepped closer. The mirror shook in her hands. Clara turned and ran again. Deeper, always deeper. She heard footsteps behind her. Hundreds of them. Breathing, laughing, voices calling her name, then laughing in reverse. She stumbled into another clearing, this one filled with wooden mannequins, each with a mirror for a face. One turned toward her. It showed her. Aged, alone, insane. Another showed her burning. Another. Jonah, buried alive. The mannequins began to move. Clara screamed, smashing one with a rock, but it bled. Real blood. From the mirror. She ran, gasping, until the forest opened once more, and she stood before the circle of pillars again. They had always been leading her back here. The center stone was now clean, the names glowing faintly. Her name had joined them. Clara Winslow. She fell to her knees. "Please," she whispered. "I'm sorry." From the shadows, Nathan stepped out again, looking more human now. "One soul," he said softly. "That's all they ask." Clara looked around. No Jonah. No one left, except herself. She stood, facing the largest mirror in the center. Her reflection smiled. "Let me in," it said. She raised her hand. The air cracked. From the woods behind her, a scream. Jonah's. He was still alive. Somewhere. Clara turned, torn. If she saved him, they'd take her. If she ran, he'd be taken. The forest had made its offer. And now it waited. The forest was no longer behind them. It was inside them. Days had passed since Clara and Jonah had escaped the depths of Deadwood. Or at least that's what they told themselves each morning when they opened their eyes to an unfamiliar silence that stretched endlessly through the air. They had made it back to the nearest town, a dusty place called Millstone Hollow that barely had a map marker, but the people there stared at them like they were phantoms. Their story of being lost in the woods was met with grim nods, not sympathy, and no one asked questions. They stayed at a rundown motel on the edge of town, where the wallpaper peeled like flaking skin and the air conditioning moaned through the night. But the silence was not safety. It followed them. Clara's dreams were no longer her own. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the mirror, still breathing, waiting. Jonah wouldn't talk much. He stayed locked in his room, pacing for hours, muttering things in a language Clara didn't understand. One night she woke up with soil in her mouth, black, wet soil. Her sheets were full of moss, the same moss that had covered the altar in the forest. The next morning her name was carved into the bathroom mirror, not scratched by hand, but grown there, like mold curling into letters. Jonah saw it and began to weep. "It's not done with us," he whispered, clutching his head. "It never lets go. We left the woods, but it followed. It's under our skin." Clara didn't argue. Her veins sometimes moved on their own, writhing like worms. Her eyes reflected flickers of that damn mirror, even in total darkness. They tried to leave Millstone Hollow. They packed their bags, got in the car, and drove north, hoping distance would weaken the grip. But the road twisted in ways it shouldn't have. A sign for Millstone Hollow appeared again and again, even when they took different routes. They drove in a loop for 9 hours and ended up back at the same gas station they had left in the morning. The cashier just looked at them with those glassy eyes and said, "Some places won't let you go until they're finished with you." That night, Clara saw something move in Jonah's shadow. It didn't belong to him. It was taller, thinner, with arms too long. It mimicked him a second too late. She didn't say anything. She just locked her door. 2 days later, Jonah was gone. His room was empty, the window wide open, a trail of mud leading into the woods beyond the parking lot. Clara followed the trail for over an hour, the trees growing thicker, familiar, breathing again. And there he was, standing in the middle of a clearing, barefoot, eyes black, his skin covered in symbols. "I heard them," he said, voice flat. "They told me I can stop the cycle, but it has to be one of us." Clara stepped back. "Jonah, we made it out. We can still fight it." But he shook his head. "You made it out. I didn't. I'm part of it now." Then he smiled, and it wasn't Jonah's smile. It was something that had worn his face before. The trees leaned in, Roots slithered beneath Clara's feet. The forest had come to reclaim its due. Clara ran, not looking back. She didn't scream. Screaming only fed it. She didn't stop running until she collapsed near the motel. But the town was gone. There was only forest. Trees where buildings should be. Moss covering the cars. She was back, or she had never left. She cried for hours, rocking herself in the dirt, until a voice whispered in her ear. Nathan's voice. Now you understand. It's not a place. It's a cycle. It chooses, it marks, and it waits. Clara opened her eyes and saw the altar again. Her name, still glowing, but now Jonah's name was beneath it, fading, absorbed. She was the last one left, and she knew then, if she wanted to survive, she'd have to make an offering, not of blood, but of memory. The forest didn't just feed on bodies, it fed on stories, it fed on fear, and the more people knew, the more it could reach. So Clara made her decision. She returned to the motel, found an old recorder in the lobby, and began to speak. She told everything. The mirror, the whispers, the roots, the trade. She let her voice shake, crack, bleed into the mic. She told the story like a warning, like a prayer, and when she was done, she left it on the counter. Then she walked back into the woods, alone, willingly, because she realized the truth. The only way to escape Deadwood was to become part of it, a name etched into bark, a whisper in the branches, a cautionary tale for those who dare stray too deep. And as the forest closed around her and the shadows pulled her down, her voice echoed from the recorder, left behind like bait. My name is Clara Whitmore. I survived Deadwood Forest, but I am not free. And if you're hearing this, it means the forest has found a new listener. Be careful. It knows your name now, too. The tape recorder sat quietly on the counter of the old motel lobby, its red light still glowing faintly, whispering static as if the forest itself breathed through it. No one had touched it in days. Dust settled on its surface, but somehow the message kept playing, over and over, every night at midnight, even though the batteries had long died. Locals didn't come near the motel anymore. The new owner, a man named Calvin Hargrove, had bought the place cheap, thinking he could flip it for profit. But since the day he arrived, he hadn't had a single guest. The walls bled moisture, even in dry heat. Lights flickered even when replaced. But what unsettled him most was the whispering that started each night at 12:01 a.m. It began as static, then turned to soft words, then to Clara's voice, reliving the horrors of Deadwood Forest. Calvin hadn't heard of Clara before he came to Millstone Hollow. He didn't know the stories. He didn't believe in ghosts. But after the third night of the whispers, he decided to listen to the tape. What he heard changed everything. Every word she spoke echoed in his mind long after the tape ended. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat. And then he started to see her, in reflections, in his dreams, in the shadows behind closed doors. At first, she begged him not to listen again. Then she screamed at him to finish the story. Calvin tried to destroy the tape recorder, but it reassembled itself by morning. The whispers turned into scratches on the walls, symbols that moved when he looked away. One night, he woke up standing in the woods, barefoot, holding the recorder in his hand. He was miles from the motel, yet had no memory of how he got there. That's when he found the tree, massive, ancient, with bark like cracked bone. Names carved into it: Clara Whitmore, Jonah Miles, Nathan Blake, and below them, a space untouched, waiting. He didn't run. He couldn't. His legs wouldn't move. The air was heavy with the scent of rotting leaves and old blood. The tree groaned, opened at the base, and Calvin heard the tape start playing again from inside the hollow trunk. He backed away, but the woods shifted around him, paths vanishing, trees closing in. That night, he made it back to the motel, but the world outside had changed. No roads, no town, just forest, endless forest. He locked himself in the lobby, trying to make sense of it, when a knock came at the door. Not a person, a child, dirty, blank-eyed. She stared at him and said, "You heard the story. That means it's inside you now." She handed him a mirror, cracked, old, still breathing, and in the glass he saw not his reflection, but Clara's eyes, watching, pleading. Behind her, Jonah stood motionless, and behind Jonah, the forest pulsed with hunger. Calvin dropped the mirror and it shattered. But instead of shards, it spilled soil, moss, and a dozen moths that flew straight into the walls, vanishing. The girl was gone. He tried to flee again the next day, but never found the edge of the woods. Each direction led to more trees, and the motel stood in the center like a tombstone. Eventually, Calvin gave up. He started recording his own message, trying to warn others. If you find this tape, leave it alone. Burn it. Bury it. Don't listen. But the tape rejected every warning. When he played it back, all he heard was Clara's voice again, louder each time. She was becoming something else. Not just a survivor, a siren, luring others in, feeding the forest. The motel began to rot from the inside. Vines slithered through the carpet. Roots burst from the plumbing. The forest was growing through time now, not just space. Calvin watched as it overtook old photographs, twisting people's faces into bark and bone. Then came the scratching at night. Something outside. Something walking on two legs but moving like a puppet. It never tried the door. It just stood there, breathing, waiting. On the seventh night, Calvin vanished. All that remained was the recorder, now humming with a new voice layered beneath Clara's. His voice. Confused, frightened, breaking. The motel stands empty, or so people say. But sometimes, when travelers stop near Millstone Hollow and find an old building where no building should be, they hear the tape. They listen, and that's all it takes. A story remembered is a story reborn. A fear relived is a doorway opened. Clara's story was never a warning, it was a seed, and with every ear that hears it, the forest grows. Listen closely. Do you hear the branches creaking? Do you feel the roots beneath your feet? The forest knows you now, and it's waiting. The forest didn't need roads anymore. It had voices, it had memory, it had hunger. By the time Elise Merrow arrived in Millstone Hollow, the town was already a ghost. She was a documentarian, obsessed with lost places, abandoned buildings, whispered legends. She had read the obscure posts online, blurred photos of the Deadwood Motel, audio clips filled with static and crying, stories of a forest that swallowed time. She thought it was fiction. She thought she was in control. Elise brought 6 cameras, 2 drones, and a microphone array. She came with a crew of 3. Matt, her skeptical producer, Lonnie, her best friend and sound engineer, and Alex, a drone pilot who believed in ghosts but hoped for fame. On their first night, they found the motel. It wasn't on any map, but the trees parted like curtains as if inviting them in. The building looked burned and rebuilt and rotted all at once. Its architecture shifted when they blinked. Lonnie said it smelled like mold and oranges. Alex thought he saw someone in the window, but they entered anyway. The air inside was cold and dry, but their breath still fogged the glass. The lobby had a layer of moss over the floor. On the wall, behind the cracked check-in desk, a mirror hung crookedly, but none of them had a reflection in it. They laughed it off. Elise set up a camera to face the mirror. "This will go viral," she said. That night, they slept in room 2A. The power was out, but the outlets worked. Somehow. Elise reviewed the footage and found that between 3:13 and 3:17 a.m., the mirror showed movement. Someone walking across the lobby. Someone not in the building. Someone dragging something behind them. Lonnie woke screaming just after. She said she dreamt of drowning in bark. Insects were crawling out of her eyes. Her mouth was full of dirt. Matt tried to calm her, but she clawed at her skin, whispering, "They're inside already, inside the roots." They gave her sleeping pills, and she slept. Elise stayed up, filming the forest from the second-story window. She saw lights, not flashlights, not fires, something bioluminescent pulsing from inside the trees like veins glowing under skin. At 4:04 a.m., the tape recorder turned on by itself. Clara's voice played again, only this time she wasn't alone. Behind her voice was another, Calvin's, distorted, like underwater groaning. Elise shut it off, but the sound didn't stop. It came from the walls, the floor, the mattress, the forest. The next day, Alex disappeared with the drone. They found the drone later, perched on a tree branch 40 feet high, still recording. In the footage, Alex walks into the trees and vanishes, but the sound picks up his voice whispering, "I see her. She's smiling now." They searched until nightfall, but the woods shifted. Landmarks reversed. The compass spun in circles. Lanny refused to enter the trees again. That night, she locked herself in the bathroom. She filled the tub and submerged herself. Matt found her floating, eyes wide, mouth open, a sprout of a tree growing from her tongue. Elise wanted to run, but there was no car, no signal, no road. The motel door was now sealed with roots, and the mirror in the lobby had shattered into liquid glass. Matt started talking to someone unseen, calling her Clara, but the voice replying wasn't hers. It was a chorus, layered, hollow, echoing with screams. The fourth night, Elise recorded herself reading the journal she found behind the front desk. It belonged to Calvin. He detailed his descent, his warnings, his dreams of the forest eating memories. The last page said only, "She needs storytellers. The more who speak her name, the wider the forest grows." Matt stopped speaking that night. He sat in the corner smiling, eyes milky white. Trees had begun growing from the motel ceiling. The walls pulsed like lungs. Elise tried to burn the building down. The flames went out before they touched the wood. The forest wouldn't allow it. That night, she made her final recording. "If you find this footage, if you hear this voice, leave. Do not share. Do not speak of her. Do not say her name." She buried the tapes in the floorboards and ran. She ran through the woods through night and day until she reached a highway that hadn't existed before. A driver found her, babbling, covered in scratches, holding a broken piece of mirror. She never spoke again after that night, but in the asylum where they kept her, she began drawing trees. Forest with eyes, buildings made of bone, people with bark for skin. She etched the same name over and over, Clara. Then one morning, Elise was gone, her room empty. No sign of escape, just moss growing on her pillow and a new tree outside the window. And now, years later, that footage is circulating online. Someone found it. Someone uploaded it. And people are listening. People are hearing the story. They think it's just horror fiction. They think it's just a podcast. But the forest listens too. Every play, every share feeds the roots. Have you noticed the trees near your house lately? Are they closer to your window than before? Are the branches touching your walls? That's how it begins, not with footsteps, but with whispers, with stories, with you. It started with the birds, or more precisely, the absence of them. Tyler Griggs noticed it when he moved back into his late uncle's cabin deep in Deadwood Forest, a place his family abandoned after the fire decades ago. He was a former firefighter turned recluse, looking for silence, isolation, peace. What he found was emptiness. No bird calls, no rustling of squirrels. Just wind that didn't move the trees and shadows that didn't belong to anything. The cabin was still intact, mostly. The wallpaper peeled like skin, the floorboards wept sap when stepped on, and in the attic, there were claw marks on the underside of the roof. Tyler told himself it was raccoons, but raccoons don't whisper in your dreams. The first night, he heard movement outside, feet crunching on old pine needles, stopping just below the bedroom window. He held his breath, reached for the hunting knife under his pillow, and stared into the glass, but saw nothing except his own reflection, except it wasn't quite his face. The eyes blinked too slow. The mouth twitched when his didn't. The second night, Tyler boarded up the window. He found claw marks inside the boards the next morning. On the third night, the tree spoke his name. Not in the wind, not in any human voice, but in a vibration, deep and low, like his bones were being used as tuning forks. They hummed, "Tyler," stretching each syllable like it had sap dripping from it. He tried to record it. The audio playback was blank, or worse, there was something else instead, a child crying. Over and over. Tyler didn't know any kids in the area. No one lived this deep anymore. That night, he followed the sound. He stepped into the woods with a lantern and a shotgun. The light barely pushed through the thick air. The trees closed behind him. After 20 minutes of walking, he came upon a clearing. In the center was a single rocking horse. It rocked slowly, creaking like old wood soaked in blood. No wind, no visible force, just movement. He turned to leave, but the path was gone. He spun in circles. Everything looked identical. Every tree the same height, every direction wrong. That's when the laughter began. Not a child, not a man. Something in between. Too loud, too close. He fired the shotgun at the sound, and something screamed. Not from pain, but annoyance. Something clicked in the dark, like nails on bark. Something ran. He ran too. Branches grabbed at his clothes. Roots rose like ropes to trip him. But he made it out. When he burst back through the cabin door, he was covered in scratches, mud, and blood. But none of it his. On the wall of the living room, scratched in what looked like charcoal, was a message. You looked. On the fifth night, Tyler set traps. He placed motion cameras in the woods, rigged flares, sharpened spikes. Nothing tripped the traps. But at dawn, every camera was smashed. Every flare was gone. And in the center of the yard, something had left a perfectly folded red dress. Child-sized, muddy at the hem, burned at the collar. He recognized it. It was Clara's. He had seen it once in an old newspaper article his uncle had saved. Clara Whitlow, the girl who vanished in Deadwood decades ago. But the dress hadn't aged. It smelled like fresh lavender. On the sixth night, Tyler tried to leave. He packed his truck, revved the engine, and started down the long dirt path back to the main road. He drove for what felt like hours, but the trees never ended. His gas gauge didn't move. His watch spun backward. And when he finally stopped, he found himself back at the cabin, as if the forest had turned inside out. Or he had. That night, he found a VHS tape in the mailbox. He didn't own a VCR, but the old cabin had one in the basement, his uncle's, covered in dust but still functional. He played the tape. It showed the inside of the cabin, the living room, the kitchen, the bedroom, all filmed from different angles. He was in every frame, sleeping. The camera moved like it was held by invisible hands. It filmed him for hours. At one point, he watched himself wake up, look directly at the camera and whisper, "They're in the trees." But he had no memory of it. At the end of the tape, a single frame showed the forest with hundreds of figures standing between the trunks. Motionless, watching, waiting. All of them had hollow eyes and tree bark growing from their skin. One of them looked like his uncle. The final second of the tape was a whisper, looped over and over. "Tell someone. Let the roots spread." On the seventh night, Tyler went mad, or something else woke up inside him. He boarded every window, piled furniture at the doors, scrawled warnings on the walls in blood and charcoal. He tried to broadcast on the old ham radio, screaming at anyone listening to avoid the forest, to burn their memories, to forget the name Clara. But the only reply was her voice, soft and cold. Too late. The trees bent toward the cabin. Roots cracked the foundation. Whispers turned to wails. And at the stroke of midnight, the forest swallowed the house whole. No one ever found it again. But the VHS tape that somehow appeared in a thrift store 3 towns away, with a note taped to it, "Play me. Tell the story. Let them in." Now it's online. You've probably seen it. You probably thought it was fake. But have you heard the silence outside your window tonight? Have you noticed your reflection blink wrong? Have you dreamed of children with wooden faces and black mouths? The forest doesn't just grow in the ground. It grows in stories. And now that you've heard this one, something has taken root in you too. It begins again with a knock on the door. Not a loud one, not urgent. 3 slow taps, like the forest itself is politely requesting permission to enter. Jenna Collins hears it just past midnight in her small second-floor apartment in Ashburn, miles from the edge of Deadwood Forest, far from where she thought the madness ended. She ignores it the first time. It comes again the next night, always at the same hour, always 3 knocks. No one's ever there when she checks. No footprints, no breeze, no reason. On the 3rd night, she opens the door. There's a box on her welcome mat, wooden, sealed with wax, no return address. Inside, a single VHS tape, a red dress neatly folded, and a note written in smudged charcoal. "Tell the story. Let them remember. Jenna has no idea why this is happening. She's a freelance editor. She's never been to Deadwood, never heard the name Clara Whitlow. But when she plays the tape using her old roommate's VCR, something shifts in the room. The lights dim, the air thickens, and for a split second, her reflection in the TV screen is someone else. The footage shows the forest. Dozens of faces, partially obscured by branches, all watching. A man screaming, another man building walls inside a cabin, children walking backward, faces hollowed out. Then a frame of Jenna sleeping in her bed. She gasps and rewinds, but the frame is gone. She screams, throws the tape into the trash, and sets the bin on fire. The smoke is black. It doesn't rise. It drips like oil. That night, she dreams of trees growing through her apartment floor. When she wakes up, there are pine needles on her pillow. The whispers begin the next day, faint at first, just beneath her hearing. Then louder, louder. They say her name in voices that sound like her own, but twisted, slowed down, mirrored. They say things she's never told anyone, her darkest secrets, whispered like lullabies. She tries to call her sister, but the phone doesn't connect. Every number she dials leads to static, then a child's laugh. On the fifth day, her walls are covered in handprints, not painted, pressed in ash. Too small to be adult, too low to be a child standing, crawling. From that moment on, mirrors no longer show her reflection, just trees. Trees in a cabin burning in the background. When she tries to leave town, her GPS loops endlessly, roads close behind her. One time she drives for 6 hours, only to find herself in front of her own apartment. The mailman avoids her now. Her landlord's office is abandoned. Neighbors don't answer their doors. It's as if the world has quietly agreed to forget her. The only thing that seems real is the knocking. Every night, 3 taps, then silence, then her name. Eventually, Jenna gives in. She opens the door one last time, and standing there is a girl, small, pale, with empty eyes and bark growing along her arms like veins. Clara. She holds out a burned photograph. Jenna, as a child, playing near trees that look just like Deadwood. But that's impossible. Her family vacationed in Florida. Except, was there a trip she doesn't remember? A time she went missing for a few hours? A scar on her ankle she never could explain? Clara whispers, "You came once. You left me. Now they want you back." Jenna runs back inside. She slams the door. But she's no longer alone. Her apartment has changed. The walls pulse with moisture. The floor is soft, like forest soil. She screams, but her voice is absorbed. Her windows now show fog and tall pines. The city is gone. She's not in Ashbend anymore. She's in the story. Days pass, or hours, or years. Time doesn't move here. It loops. Jenna finds journals, written in her handwriting, but older. Pages upon pages describing events that haven't happened yet. Forest fires, disappearances, a podcast about cursed woods, a viral video showing a shadow stepping out of a tree. Jenna realizes this isn't just a haunting, it's a seed, a virus, a story that spreads through memory, through attention, through belief. And every time someone hears it, the roots dig deeper. She was chosen not to end it, but to carry it forward. That night, the whispers give her a task. Tell the world. Let it grow. And so she writes. She records the tape. She uploads the audio. She mails the box to someone new, maybe to you. And now here you are, listening, wondering why the room feels colder, why the lights flickered just a second ago, why you keep glancing at the corners of the screen. Maybe you've already heard a creak behind you. Maybe your reflection just blinked a second too late. Maybe your dreams tonight will have pine needles and distant knocking. 3 slow taps. Remember, don't open the door. Don't answer the whispers. And above all, whatever you do, don't tell anyone the story. Because that's how it grows. That's how it spreads. That's how the forest finds its way back. One whisper at a time.